I absolutely love topwater fishing. It's one of my favorite things to do, if not my absolute favorite thing to do. It doesn't matter if I'm throwing a walk the dog style bait, a buzz bait, a plopping bait, a frog. Watching a big bass blow up on a topwater absolutely gets me going. But sometimes they miss it, and it is super infuriating when they miss your topwater, because it can be absolutely heartbreaking to watch a big bass blow up on something and not get it into their mouth. And there's really one of two options that you can do. You can either keep on working that bait and hope they come back and they eat it, or you can follow up with another bait. And that's what I want to talk about in today's video, is my favorite follow-up baits for when big bass miss my topwaters. I mean, it's one of those things that I have caught so many key kicker fish in tournaments and just, fun fishing that I might have missed otherwise if I hadn't have followed up with a slightly different presentation to get those fish to eat. And so my first one is a wacky rig stick bait. Absolutely phenomenal for getting bass to bite that have blown up on a topwater and missed it. And the reason for it is just the simplicity of the lure and what it does. When you wacky rig a bait like a stick bait, this is a Berkley Accent General, you throw it out there and it hits the water, it's going to slowly start just shimmying down through the water column, slowly sinking towards the bottom. And that does a really good job of looking like what a bass is trying to do when it actually sometimes just runs through a topwater and doesn't actually eat it with a lot of conviction. So bass oftentimes will run through bait fish or run through bluegill or smack them with their tail, do all kinds of different things, essentially to kind of stun them, and then they'll actually come back and start to eat them. And I've seen this so many times where they just will thrash through something, totally miss it, and then come back and start looking for it. And if you can reel up really quick and throw back out there with this wacky rig stick bait, and that thing starts shimmying down through the column, it does a really good job of looking like an injured bait fish, an injured bluegill, and those bass will just swim by, pluck that thing up, and you've put a bass into the boat or into the kayak. So a phenomenal tool as a follow-up bait. The next one is going to be a weightless fluke style bait. Now this is super deadly, and the reason this is so deadly is because oftentimes when we're throwing things like spooks or other walking style baits, that walk back and forth, that walk the dog style action is what's actually drawing those fish in there and what they actually want to eat. And what's really cool is not only can you let this thing sink like you can a wacky rig and it'll shimmy on the fall, but you also can twitch it and it's going to walk the dog right under the surface. And so it allows bass that may not have totally committed to the topwater to have a very, very similar walk the dog presentation, just subsurface, and allows those bass to really key in on it and get a hold of it. And again, just like your stick bait, it's a phenomenal follow-up bait to put big fish in the boat. And that's where I've seen this work the most, is if I'm working something like a big, like a spook or a jaywalk or some big walk the dog style bait, follow up with this thing. If they miss that walking bait, you can get them to eat this thing a lot better than they do that topwater. And then the last one is one that I don't think a lot of people consider as a follow-up bait, but it's absolutely one of my favorites to throw, and that is a flipping jig. And not just any flipping jig, but a white flipping jig. If you fish in lakes like mine where you're fishing around a lot of bait fish, a white flipping jig is a little bit of a just secret fish catcher that will get a ton of bites. And obviously the white does a really good job of mimicking things like bait fishing, shad and gizzard shad and all those different things. And what I've found, especially when I'm fishing like a buzz bait with a skirt on it, they want to eat that buzz bait. They want to eat that skirt, especially a plopper. They'll do it with a plopper as well. There's just something about the way that works and looks in the water that they want to key in on, and sometimes they just miss it. And if you flip back in there with something like a white jig, it does a really good job of looking like what those bass have already keyed on to eat and get those bass to eat. And I've actually seen times, and this is no joke, where I have followed up with the stick bait and the fluke style bait when I'm fishing things like a buzz bait and a plopper, and they just don't want to eat it. But when I follow up with the jig, they'll absolutely crush it. I think another thing that the jig does really, really well is that it falls really, really fast. For the most part, I'm fishing anywhere from a 1/2 to a 3/4 ounce white flipping jig when I'm doing this. And I think it's because they're already keying in on something that's moving really, really quick. A buzz bait, a plopper, that's a topwater that's just moving and grooving. And so they're really super active. And I think sometimes when you drop something in their face like this that doesn't move very fast, they're just uninterested with it. Where if you drop this, it passes by their face really, really fast. It already is white. It looks like the thing they were trying to eat. they'll lash out, they'll react to it, and they'll get it, and you can put fish in the boat. And so those are my 3 favorite follow-up baits for when they miss your topwater. If you guys want to see me get on some awesome buzzbait fishing action, click this video, it's popping up right here.